Hi, mathletes. Today we're going to look at more ratios using tape diagrams, and we're going to look at two examples today. If you want to learn more about it, I suggest that you look at this video first because these are a little more difficult problems, and so the ones in a previous video are a little easier for you. The first one isn't as hard as the second one. The second one is quite challenging. So here's the first one. The ratio of Jimmy's marbles to the number of Calvin's marbles was 3 to 4. After Jimmy bought another 60 marbles, he had twice as many marbles as Calvin. So how many marbles did Jimmy have at first? So let's think of our original ratio, and that's in our first sentence. We know Jimmy has a ratio of 3. Remember, Jimmy's first, so the first number represents Jimmy. So I'm going to show this using my tape diagrams, and I'm going to use that using 3 squares. So there's my 3 squares for the ratio of 3. Now for Calvin, it's 4. So for Calvin, I'm going to put the 4 squares to represent Calvin. So I have my 3 for Jimmy and my 4 for Calvin. I want to look at after Jimmy bought another 60 marbles, that he had twice as many marbles as Calvin, because that's the second sentence. So in order to figure this out, I need to think about how much twice as many marbles as Calvin is. Well, Calvin has 4 marbles. So twice would be 4 times 2, which is 8. So twice as many as Calvin is 8. Jimmy right now has 1, 2, 3. So to have 8, he would need 5 more squares. So there's my 5 more squares. These 5 squares represent the 60 marbles that he bought. So there's my 60 marbles. So again, after buying the 12. So now I can think of my ratio as there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares, and it represents the 60 marbles. I can write that as a ratio of 5 to 60. I can simplify this ratio because they're both divisible by 5. So if I divide the first number by 5, I must divide the second number by 5. And now my simplified ratio is 1 to 12. That means that every one square, represents 12 marbles. So I'm going to put 12 in each one of these white boxes. Now, if each one of the white boxes or squares are 12, that means all of them have to be 12. And now I wanted to know how many marbles did Jimmy have at first? Well, here's the original ones. So there's 12 plus 12 plus 12, or the product of 12 and 3, which is 36. I can check this to make sure that I'm correct by starting with, again, my ratio of 1 to 12. And I need to think about, I have 3 of the squares, so I multiplied both my 1 and my 12 by 3, and indeed I do get 36, so it checks out. Here's our second one. Again, you can see this is a little bit longer, and there's a lot of information in here, so we're just going to look at this step by step. A clown has 42 red balloons and 66 blue balloons. After he gave an equal number of red balloons and blue balloons away, the ratio of the number of red balloons to the number of blue balloons he had left was 4 to 7. How many balloons did he give away altogether? Whew, that's a lot of information. Okay, let's start with what we know so far. In the beginning, we know that the clown had 42 red balloons. So I'm going to draw that out. There's my 42 red balloons. And I also know that he has 66 blue balloons. So I have 66 blue balloons. Now it says after he gave an equal number of red balloons and blue balloons away, the ratio of the number of red balloons to the number of blue balloons was 4 to 7. Whew, let's see what I can look at this part first. I can see that the difference between the red balloons and the blue balloons is 24. Now, it said an equal number of red balloons and blue balloons were given away, equal number. I don't know how many though, so I'm going to draw this by just saying this amount. I don't know what this amount is, but I know that it has to be the same for the red balloons and the blue balloons because it said equal number. So it's the same number were removed. And I know that the difference between the red and the blue are 24. Now, I know that the ratio of what he had left is 4 to 7. So the remainder of these balloons right here is going to be 4. So the red would be 4 and the blue would be 7. Okay, what I did, I just shrunk what was on the other page to make it smaller here so that we can continue working over here. So I'm going to do my ratio of 4 to 7 because we know that the remainder is 4 of the red and 7 of the blue. Now, the difference still is going to remain the same. Here it's 24, but now that we have 4 to 7, the difference here is going to be 7 minus 4, which is 3. So I can represent it by these 3 squares. So let's look at some ratios of squares to balloons. So I know that I have 3 squares, and these 3 squares here, 1, 2, 3, represent 24 balloons. I can simplify that by dividing them both by 3, and now my simplified ratio is 1 to 8. That means that the blue squares to blue balloons is also 1 to 8. And the red squares to red balloons is also 1 to 8. Now I'm going to look at my blue squares and my blue balloons. I know that I have 7 squares, so I'm going to multiply my 1 by the 7. And I know that if I multiply the 1 by the 7, I need to multiply my 8 by the 7. So my ratio of blue squares to blue balloons is 7 to 56. For my red squares, I've got 4 squares, so I'm going to multiply my 1 by my 4, and I get 4, and then I'm going to multiply the 8 by the 4, and I get my 32. So there are now 56 balloons that are blue, but there used to be 66 balloons that were blue, which means 10 blue balloons were removed. There are 32 red balloons. But there used to be 42 red balloons, which means 10 red balloons were removed. So 10 blue and 10 red, which makes sense because it equaled the same number were removed. So that means he gave away a total of 20 balloons. Whew, that one was a tough one, but I hopefully that made sense to you. There was lots of steps to it, but again, visually helps to make sense. And again, using colors sometimes helps to understand too. So I hope that helped you with understanding more about tape diagrams.